Good day, students. For today's, we're going to discuss about learners with difficulties remembering and focusing. So first, before we proceed, let me read our learning objectives. At the end of the discussion, 80% of the students are expected to understand the meaning of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The second, we have the identify the different specific learning disabilities.
First, we're going to define the definition. The International Classification of Functioning Disabilities and Health of the World Health Organization provides definition of specific functions and focusing, and it has two classifications: the memory functions and attention function. The memory function includes short-term memory, long-term memory, and retrieval. Attention functions include sustaining, shifting, dividing, and sharing attention. First, we're going to discuss the memory function, which is the short-term memory. Short-term memory is a mental resources that allow for storing information temporarily for only approximately 30 seconds. Take for example is makita ka gwapo, then wala ka kahibol sa yangan, pila ra ka seconds ato, makalimtan na to nimo because wala mo gisuwat or wa ka kahibol kung unsa yangan. Muna siya example of short-term memory. The next is the long-term memory. Storing information long period of time. From the word itself, long-term memory is you can store information a long period of time. So the third one is the retrieval. Retrieval is a mental resources used to recall information stored in a long-term memory. So the example of the retrieval is your memory when you are a child, then a present age like now, you can recall those memories that happen in your life. Then you can share it to your friends. That is the example of retrieval. The second factor is the attention function. It has classified into three classifications. The first one is the sustained attention. Sustained attention is a mental resources used to maintain attention for an extended period. Take for example, if you make an assignment and you start at 3 p.m. and you finish it in 3 p.m., you didn't notice that the time passed because you sustain or focus on the certain activities or certain tasks. This is the one example of sustained attention. The second one is the selective attention. Selective attention is a mental resources that allow for focusing on a specific stimulus that is very important. Take for example, is nagplay kag video, then nagplay po dag video imong kauban, nakusog ang pagplay sa video, then makadungog ka, but you didn't distract or wala ka magpaapekto adto nga situation. Ni-focus gyapon ka sa imong gitan-aw. So, mao na siya ang example sa selective attention. Another example is nagbasa ka og novel or libro, then ang mga silingan nagplay og kusog kayo nga sound, but wa ka magpa-distract sa imong surroundings or imong environment. You still to focus to read that novel or article. The third one is dividing attention. Dividing attention is a mental resources that involve focusing on one or more activities or tasks. So example is ang mga tasks nga gibuhat nimo, gidungan nimo sa isa ka moment. Take for example is nagtalk ka sa imong kauban while making the activities or driving while listening music. This is the example of dividing attention. Dungan mo ang isa ka task. The next one is the learning disabilities. Gregorio 2012 provide common components definition of learning disabilities, the intellectual functioning within normal range, and difficulties in learning in one or more academic areas. You can determine if the learner has a learning disabilities if dili siya makapokus sa iyahang gibuhat or di siya makapokus sa isa ka task. Ma-determine mo nga na siya learning disabilities. Samuel Kirk in 1962 coined the term learning disabilities. And when he met with parents and families as they discussed about students encountered pronounced difficulties in school despite having above average intelligence. He further described students with disabilities are heterogeneous mix of learners who all had neurologically based problem and affected their learning in different ways. Take for example, Evan has above average, has possess on learning disabilities. Take example, maayo ka ni nga aspect or maayo ka ni nga task, but ari nga task is hina ka, you determine has learning disabilities. The National Joint Commission on Learning Disabilities on 1990 is a general term that refers to the heterogeneous group of disorder manifested by significant difficulties in the acquisitions and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, and mathematical abilities. The next is the specific learning disabilities. It is a disorder in one or more basic psychological process involved in understanding, using language spoken or written, which may manifest as difficulties in the ability to listen, think, spark, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. So it has three factors. The first one is the dyslexia. Dyslexia is difficulties with reading, spelling, and oral reading fluency. Example sa specific learning disabilities na naay sakit sa dyslexia is the students or learners nga maglisod sa og spelling, maglisod sa og basa. Samot na kung imo siyang pauralon. That is the example of learners with dyslexia. The second one is the dyscalculia. Learners with difficulties in math, computation, problem solving, and analysis. You can determine if that learners has disabilities with dyscalculia if he or she encountered in computation of problem solving or about numbering. Maglisod siya og solve sa problem. Example, involved ni siya og numbers. Muna siya example of learning disabilities with dyscalculia. The third one is the dysgraphia. The learners with difficulties with handwriting and written expressions. Example ani is learners has difficulties in writing and expression or maglisod siya og suwat, maglisod po siya og express siyang thoughts. Muna siya sign if that learners has learning disabilities called dysgraphia. The next is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by excessive amounts of attention, carelessness, hyperactivity, which involves into a nerve restlessness and adulthood and impulsivity that are pervasive and impairing otherwise age inappropriate. And it has three factors. The first is the intention, not being able to keep focus. Take for example, if maghatag kag activity sa child, then dili siya makapokus or na siya buhaton nga lain. Mo na sa example of an intention na dili siya makapokus even though imo siyang gihatagan o guide. Hyperactivity, excess movement that is not fitting to the setting and analysis. So example ani is maghatag kag instruction nga dili dapat nga ni buhaton, but the learners still do, or opposite iyang gibuhat, mono iyang gibuhat ang di nimo angay na ipabuhat, is mo na example of the hyperactivity. So the third one is the impulsive. Hasty act occur in the moment without thought. Mo-occur as example ni is ang bata na magsigig tabi even though wala siya kaistorya. Makadetermine ka na kaning at siya na siya problema sa attention.